Welcome to Coast AM's YouTube channel. I'm George Norrie. Like, share, and subscribe. Also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and coasttocoastam.com. Become a Coast Insider for ad-free access to thousands of shows you'll really enjoy.
Good evening, everyone. You're in the right place at the right time. This is Coast to Coast AM, blasting out of the Mojave Desert like a Scirocco, blazing across the land, slamming into your radio like a supercharged nanoparticle of unobtainium. Greetings from the boldest, bawdiest, most outrageous city in the world, the planetary capital of sun, fun, sin, sex, and secrets, my not-so-humble hometown, Las Vegas, Nevada. My name is George Knapp, your occasional host, designated driver of the airwaves, and moderator of tonight's upcoming cacophonous cavalcade of conversation. Thanks for joining us tonight. What a week we just had for UFO news. There was this palpable buzz leading up to the long-anticipated report from the Director of National Intelligence, information compiled by the UAP task force over the last 6 months, although probably longer than that. They waited until pretty late in the day on Friday to uncork this thing. People in UFO world are torn right down the middle, so many expressing their utter contempt for the 9-page summary, calling it a nothing burger, a continuation of the cover-up, a whitewash, and a lot of words I can't use on the radio. And then others who see it as a major step forward, in effect, an acknowledgement that this is a real, legitimate issue that requires a larger, more organized, more serious investigation. In this 9-page summary of the 144 cases examined, 143 remain unidentified. I know that over the past few years, we've sort of been spoiled by all the UFO news that keeps being broken week after week. Stories in major media, interviews with prominent people, members of Congress, former presidents, former intelligence chiefs, in which these power players have finally grudgingly admitted what we've known for a long time, that this is the real deal, that the topic is no longer on the fringe. It's gone mainstream, and there are serious issues to consider, national security issues, aviation safety issues, let alone the larger unanswered questions like, where are these things from? How do they work? Who sent them? What's their long-term interest in us? My take on this is based on sort of the longer viewpoint, the longer point of reference, 30-plus years of hearing mostly dismissive comments from the military, from the government, from major media, the lies that started way back in 1947, 74 years ago, swamp gas, weather balloons. Oh, no, that was the planet Venus that, landed on the gypsum flats in New Mexico. Oh, that was probably a spy plane like the U-2, though they don't exactly look like flying saucers, nor do they tend to land in people's backyards. So for me, what came out in that report is a breath of fresh air. Even though they seemingly did their best to downplay things, no emotional language there. I'm not sure there's an adjective in the entire 9 pages, but I think the report was written for multiple audiences, including members of Congress who are not yet ready to jump on the UFO train. It didn't mention extraterrestrials or aliens, didn't ask if the craft could be interdimensional or temporal visitors. They left open the slim possibility that some of these could be foreign drones or secret American black projects, though the report did say there is no evidence for either of those options. And then, after the report came out, the Pentagon issued a directive that revamped how UFO, UAP cases are to be reported, how the information should be shared, told all the different branches of the military, including the Air Force, that they need to get with the program and cooperate on what comes next. There's so much that was not in that report. Roswell, crash disks, metamaterials, bodies, alien abductions, close encounters, none of those subjects that grip our attention here, and none of the data or incidents prior to 2004. This is a very narrow focus, military encounters with unknown objects since the Tic Tac. And even though it leaves open other possible explanations, this report legitimized a permanent, ongoing investigation. I think that's a good thing. I think it'll make it easier for Congress to go ahead and come up with some money for a larger program, maybe something attached to a civilian agency, not just the military. Lawmakers can tell their constituents they're not spending money to chase space aliens, or not space aliens alone, but rather to protect national security, to keep our aviators safe, too. My take is that this is a good start, especially given the limitations of the small team that put this together in such a short amount of time. And, I'm aware that many people have other opinions, so tonight we'll hear some. I've invited some of our friends on the show to kick this around a bit. Filmmaker Jeremy Corbell will be here in a few minutes to give us his take. And then later in this hour, we'll be joined by two other intrepid citizen journalists, Danny Silva of the Silver Record and Joe Murgia, UFO Joe, who've been in touch with a wide spectrum of the public and the UFO public since Friday, and they'll share some of that feedback with us. In the second hour, one of the most important alien abduction stories ever. This kind of gets lost in the shuffle as we focus on military studies, nuts and bolts saucers, sensors, that sort of thing. This is the case that inspired the late Bud Hopkins to write his landmark book, Intruders, which, by the way, was made into a CBS network miniseries. It remains one of the best documented close encounter cases of all time. In Bud's book, the prime character was known by a pseudonym, but she came out a year or so later, a couple of years later, and revealed her true identity. Deborah Jordan Coble is her name, and her extraordinary experiences did not end with the Intruders book or the miniseries. They've continued and got even stranger than her encounters with those bug-eyed beings, wherever they're from. Deborah joins us 2 hours from now to get caught up on her life, her work with Bud Hopkins, and the evidence of her many experiences. Webmaster Lex Lonehood and I had no problems coming up with items and oddities to use for this week's Knapp's News. Seems like every news outlet in the world had at least one UFO story this week. We have a collection of some of the best, and you can find them on the Coast to Coast website under News. Among the outlets that wrote about the UAP Task Force report, not all the usual suspects. National Geographic, for example, Scientific American, Politico, The Hill, which, by the way, argued that any new study or investigation of UAP needs to be government-wide, not just a military agency or some other single agency. I saw quite a few multiple bogus claims made in mainstream media articles. A leading UK newspaper had a sub-headline that says the DNI report ruled out aliens as an explanation for UAP incidents. Not true. Or the Wired article that says this report cost $22 million. Not sure how to break this to Wired, but the study had exactly $0 to spend, zero budget. 2 staff members put this together, this comprehensive report about a massive, complicated, 74-year-old mystery, and they did it in a mere 6 months. I think we owe those two a debt of gratitude, and we can talk more about that in a bit. So check out those stories and more in Knapp's News to get caught up. While you're on the website, find out how to become a Coast Insider. The cost is 15 cents a day. If you subscribe for a year, gives you access to a huge archive of programs and interviews. You never have to miss any of them because you can listen anytime you want, as often as you want, including the Art Bell Vault, all of those classics. We also have information on the website about how you can subscribe to George Norrie's television program, Beyond Belief, television version of the content that George delivers here on the radio. Both good deals. With that, let's assume the position. Bring in the dog and the cat and the rabbit and the chicken. It's too hot outside for those critters. Put on a pot of Joe, slide your bod into those silky summer jammies, poke your toes into those bunny slippers, plop yourself down in a comfy spot, turn down the lights, and turn up the radio. In a moment, investigative filmmaker Jeremy Corbell starts off our conversation about the big news of the week, the UAP Task Force report and reactions to it. I'm George Knapp, and this is Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back. We know from the tone of the report that was made public on Friday, and presumably from the much larger, classified version of the UAPTF report that was provided to Congress several days before the public got to see this 9-page document, that there are people inside the Pentagon who take this subject seriously, who want the handcuffs taken off so they can really dig into the UFO mystery, find out where the bodies are buried, literally. But just as surely, there are powerful people on the inside who still want this to go away. They don't want anyone looking into closets or under the couch cushions for secret stuff. They want the public to get tired of this and just go away. Well, not if we can help it. One of the people who's worked hard to rip down the veil of secrecy is filmmaker Jeremy Corbell, with whom I've collaborated on some pretty big stories this year, videos and other images that were part of the task force briefing document that's been used over the past 3 years to inform higher-ups about why this is a legit subject have come out. Jeremy also produced 2 documentaries that many of you have seen, one about Bob Lazar, the other about Skinwalker Ranch, and as a matter of disclosure, he included me in both of those film productions. He will also be part of 2 major productions, network broadcasts coming this week. One is on the Fox network, airing Tuesday night nationwide, and then another on Wednesday, a 3-hour live special from Las Vegas, carried by both the Science Channel and the Discovery Network, and looking forward to seeing those. Jeremy Corbell, welcome back.
Hey, George, thanks for having me on.
Let's start with this. Give me your first reaction when you read that 9-page report on Friday. The first word that comes to mind.
I'm encouraged.
Did you just say, is that all there is? 9 pages?
I know. Look, 6 pages, right? As you
Yeah.
reported, the first page was the cover page, the last 2 were indexes. But, here's the deal. This is a sea change. These aren't just words. This is true. It's a sea change of policy on how to handle the UFO mystery. These 6 pages, 9 total, they represent a complete transformation of the way the United States military and our government is not only communicating with the American public, but actually working on this UFO mystery.
9 pages, I was thinking to myself. That's it? Because I actually expected something about twice as large. Only 17 or 18 pages, somewhere in there, is what kind of the info I had. But I wonder if they cut something out of this version. And you happen to know that there's a lot more information that they have because you have a lot of insight into the larger briefing document that I just mentioned.
Yeah. So look, bottom line is I was really encouraged by just the general sense of public disappointment. It was really cool to see the people, on the internet and just absolutely saying, hey, we expected more. We expected more transparency. We expected more information. We expected more data. So that indicated to me that there's a transcendent curiosity. It's moved from this emergent pop culture situation that we're in into the realms of really transformative policy. So I know people were disappointed, and I am so glad to see that because there is more information. These are not the goods. However, it's going to take us being that interested and that passionate about it in order to move the needle forward from here.
Yeah, I saw a lot of anger out there in UFO world. So what else is new? That's pretty much an everyday occurrence. As more stories have broken, it seems like people get angrier and angrier, not realizing that over the long term, this is like a golden age, the stuff that we've been able to get out that other mainstream media have covered over the last, especially over the last year, but really over the last 3.5 years. I mean, it's I think in some ways the newcomers to the topic, the people who came in after the New York Times story and were drawn to it are kind of spoiled a little bit, don't realizing how hard nuggets were to come by in the years past.
Yeah, I was talking with my friend we call UFO Jesus, who's like at post-disclosure world, and it was so funny. He was saying, it's as if I have UFO PTSD at this moment. When people are into this and they have so much information and they see so little coming out from the government, it's funny. The people that are interested in this and that have been following this and have been living in a data-rich environment when it comes to the UFO reporting, people are going to go through this feeling when it moves into pop culture. It needs to move into pop culture. It is moving into pop culture. But there's going to be this funny thing where all of a sudden something that was fringe and something that had ridicule and stigma is now accepted. It's accepted by our military. It's accepted by our government. So we're going to be looking at this, and we're going to have some growing pains because we're going to say, hey, everybody should be a part of this conversation. And you're starting to see academics and scientists jump in with both feet, which is what we've always asked for. Of course, they do so as if they're the first to ever look at UFO evidence. Why was I excluded? That's absolute hubris for them to say, why was I excluded? The evidence was always there. They just didn't look at it because of the stigma. So it's a double-edged sword. On one side, it's so great that it's moving into pop culture, and it's so great that scientific minds are starting to look at this, and they're starting to look at it soberly and with a dedicated focus. But, those of us who've been really into this for a long time, we're going to have a little UFO PTSD because it's like all of a sudden there's going to be 1,000 more voices in this field, which is what we've always asked for.
Yeah, UFO Jesus is always not only entertaining, he always has great insight. I'll have him back on the program sometime soon to get caught up on what's going on in his corner of the cosmos. And we got a clip we'll hear from him a little bit later too. Like to always hear his voice. I was struck by the language, very careful language in this report, very unemotional, terse. And no details about the individual incidents. We can guess what some of them are talking about. I mean, starting with 2004, there's not much guesswork involved what case that is. But they did not mention the Tic Tac. They didn't mention the Nimitz. No details about that 2004 story or incident that got the whole thing rolling. Were you surprised?
I mean, it's like, yeah. I mean, look, they couldn't give us less. But here's the deal. There's so many deals, but here's the basic deal, is what we get out of the report is a complete and absolute 180-degree turn, where 1969 with Project Blue Book, supposedly the last time our United States government studied UFOs, which of course we know is not true, they're saying that it is worth the scientific scrutiny. It is worth proper research and development study of the UFO phenomenon, and indeed, that is the conclusion and suggestion of the report. So when you speak with people who write these types of reports for our militaries, they have a completely different standpoint than I initially had when the pages hit my eye. You know, there is language in there that really clearly states what the intent and what the action should be. I've had a number of fighter pilots call me and tell me, look, I'm not going to be surprised if we're sent out on a sortie or a mission specifically to target, film, capture analysis, and sensor data on UFOs. Actually, they're saying, we know it's going to happen. We've seen it happen when memos like this have come through when it comes to foreign adversarial drones and that kind of thing. So I think that we need to really stop for a moment and try to understand what this language means. What did it actually say? It said a lot of great things. And I'm not just being optimistic as I usually am. This is big. Everybody needs to understand. This is huge.
You know, I want to talk about this with Joe and Danny when they come on too, but there was a story about a week ago from Florida, a Florida article about the Air Force building what amounts to a listing station, a UFO monitoring station in southern Florida, which really makes a lot of sense when you think about the gimbal being down there, a series of incidents in that general area in 2015. There they are building this observation tower or facility that would be able to scan the skies and look for these things specifically. And I wondered, is that real or not? Then this report comes out. You know, we haven't heard anything from the Air Force. The Navy's been leading the charge on this. The Air Force has been completely mum since the New York Times story of December 2017. Nothing out of them. And, you know, we've always heard bits and pieces about them as being the real repository for UAP, UFO information, maybe even wreckage and bodies, as far back as before the Air Force existed as its own entity, 1947. But this report gave thanks to all the agencies that participated in providing information. Air Force is listed. And then this directive comes out after the report saying, basically, everybody's going to get on board. We want all branches of the service to get on board and make a concerted effort to gather information on this topic, which was astonishing.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, look, we're bearing witness, let's just be honest, to one of the biggest failures of intelligence ever within the history of the United States. But the difference is this is now an acknowledged failure of intelligence. The stigma and the ridicule, it has prohibited us from looking into this topic, from looking at who is operating these craft that fly with impunity in a restricted airspace over sensitive military installations and nuclear weapon silos, shutting on and off our nuclear weapons that outpace, outmaneuver, and outperform our fastest, most powerful warplanes. Like Commander David Fravor said, he was powerless. So this is a huge failure in intelligence, and I am very encouraged that now we are going to be looking at this as the will of the American public asks. We're going to be looking into this, and I really hope the good information, some of which you and I have been exposed to, that good information is put forward to the American public. I think that's important. UFO transparency. And in my personal opinion, I've said this many times this week, I do believe that it is time to initiate a broad spectrum, multidisciplinary study. A project, as some of our friends, George, have said, an effort comparable in scope and scale to the U.S. Manhattan Project in 1939, the Atomic Project. It is time.
We're talking with Jeremy Corbell, filmmaker. When we come back, we're going to get into some of the whiny, groany, moany comments from debunkers, exactly what you would expect from them. We're talking about Jeremy Corbell, the filmmaker, about the big news this week, the UAP task force report released by the Director of National Intelligence, 9 pages. One of those pages, as Jeremy mentioned, is a cover page. 2 pages are indexes, so really 6 pages of information. But if you know how to read it and read between the lines, it's jam-packed with some pretty big stuff. We'll be joined in a couple of minutes by Danny Silva and Joe Murgia and get their take on some of this. But I want to ask Jeremy about some of the debunkers, some of the really prominent debunkers who are having conniption fits right now since that report came out. We'll get into that in a moment here on Coast to Coast AM. Jeremy, I saw a string of tweets today from Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I know you and he have jousted a bit on social media, and I know he's been asked about UFOs, UAPs, multiple times on different talk shows, and it seems to me that he's grown increasingly irritated about the whole thing. And some of what's come through has been, well, look, if this was true, the government would tell me about it. I'd know already. And he seemingly has not been contacted by the Pentagon about this mystery. And so today he put out this string of tweets that were just silly. It seems like he's really irritated now with the facts of that report. What's your take on that?
I mean, do not underestimate human hubris. The evidence has been there for UFOs. It's been a data-rich environment for decades. Yet science and scientists have been able to wave their hand and say, oh, we know what's going on. We've never looked at the evidence, but we know what's going on. So we're just seeing this kind of friction with people coming into the media. Some are embracing the facts, and others are rejecting them because they don't even understand how the basic FLIR, forward-looking infrared camera systems work. It's shameful. I wish I had nicer words. I tried to give him evidence. I tried to make this a little bit more of a good situation for everybody. But honestly, some people just don't have the capacity. I do want to give an honorable mention today, though. It was so interesting. I saw in a recent PBS report, it's a video, Congressman Andre Carson of Indiana. I don't know his politics, but I do know that he served as a chairman of counterterrorism and counterintelligence, and he was in the House Permanent Select Committee of Intelligence. He recently said, and I will paraphrase this, about the release of the report. He said, I hope it is to have a series of hearings so we can at least provide the information to the American public, to give them resolve and quell their thirst for this wonderful phenomenon that we've been talking about and movies have been made about for the past 7 or 8 decades. That is an epic and unsolicited statement, and it should resonate with those interested in the UFO mystery. Here's a guy that came forward from a position to know, someone that's read the report. Those words are powerful. So look, we can't have everybody all the time. What we do have is people coming forward boldly to be representing the American public and talking about the UFO mystery.
One other question before we bring Danny and Joe on. You said you'd heard from a lot of pilots, and they would not be surprised to be sent out on a sortie specifically to look for these things, photograph, document, or whatever. Do you have any feedback from pilots who still think that it's a bunch of nonsense, that they would not cooperate with this kind of thing? I mean, this report even specifically singles out the stigma attached to this subject and how even now, after the Navy put out these directive, change policy, trying to make it easier for aviators to report this thing, they still look the other way when they come across them because they worry what it's going to do to their career. What are you hearing along those lines?
Yeah, it's either side. I mean, look, predominantly for me, I'm speaking with pilots of all kinds, people who are working within the military that say to me, it's difficult. There's a stigma in the military. For example, when you and I broke all of these videos and these stories, and the Pentagon confirmed the videos that we put out and the photos that we put out, all of a sudden we find out, okay, there are these classified briefings. At least you and I were able to inform people in positions of power that they should absolutely do briefings and inform everybody that they're in charge of. And so you and I put out a whole bunch of APBs saying, hey, why don't you look into this? Why don't you take these reports and educate everybody that you're in command of? And it sure happened. And I got reports back, and people were saying, man, it was pretty crazy. People were snickering. They were kind of laughing. But it is a very real thing that even, especially in the military, that there's a little bit of this stigma that just is predominant. So that is something that was acknowledged in the report, that there is a sociocultural kind of issue that is a hurdle that we need to get over, because the people in those planes with those sensors are the best capable to track, target, and identify these unidentifieds. So we need to remove the stigma. I will give you a ray of hope here, which is that the predominant thing that I hear from people that are serving, that contact me on a daily basis, from fighter pilots to people that are on warships, is that this is something that they are interested in, that they wish they had better reporting practices on, and that they want to be part of the solution of.
Well, that's encouraging. Good. We'll bring on Danny Silva and UFO Joe Murgia. Danny publishes his work at silvarecord.com. He's a citizen journalist, been digging into UFOs, UAPs for a few years now, and Joe Murgia has been interested in the subject ever since reading Whitley Strieber's Communion back in 1996, and we'll give you some links to his work as well. Both of them have carved out their own niche in the UFO topic and are pretty respected these days. Danny and Joe, welcome back to Coast to Coast.
Thank you, George.
Thanks, George. Great to be back again.
Well, let's same question I started Jeremy with is, when you first get your hands on this 9-page report, are you thinking to yourself, Joe, you first, oh my gosh, only 9 pages, really?
So a couple of months ago, a source of mine told me to be prepared for something really underwhelming. I mean, like extremely underwhelming. So when I actually read the report, I had that in mind. So as I started reading it, my expectations were so low. I wasn't disappointed right away. But then I see early on it says some UAP may be attributable to sensor anomalies, and right away I'm like, oh no, Seth Shostak shows up again. You know, their glitches, their reflections in the windshield of the F-18s. You know, as I read more and more, I'm like, this is pretty good. And a lot of people predicted this is going to be Condon Part 2, but in the report it says there are a flight safety issue and a possibly a national security concern. So right there, it's different than Condon. So I was excited mostly when it said the cases we looked at, we have no data that these are foreign adversary or ours. And in the New York Times article, they had sources that said the vast majority of these cases, we can rule out that they're U.S. tech. So I was like, okay, maybe some of them. But in the report, they said, no, we have no data for that. So for me, that was a good thing. So with the low expectations, I was like, this is good. I spoke to an Intel friend who wrote an article, his take. He's been in Intel for 20 years. It's on my blog. He's very positive, and he looks at it from an Intel person. So when people look at that, it's a little bit technical, but it's really positive looking forward, how this is the first step. And as Lou said, this is the beginning of the beginning.
And Danny, same thing. When you look at it, oh my gosh, this is all there is to it. This is going to be a disaster. Are you worried at all, or did you realize when you first got into it right away that this was an important deal?
I knew that this was a chess, not checkers situation, so I was extremely excited. I was going into it thinking this is probably what was going to happen. And when I looked in the report, they were talking about the 5 observables that Lou Elizondo has brought out. They were talking about advanced technology, and then they also left the other situation going on, and we all know what other means. So basically, we know that this is what we wanted. We're killing the stigma. We're in a heavyweight fighter match. against the stigma and against transparency, and we've just hit them with some body blows. And politicians are taking it seriously now. 6 months ago, I was writing a blog every single time a politician commented on UAP, and it was few and far in between. Now I can't keep up. Every politician is commenting, it seems like. So everything that Lou Elizondo has done, everything that Chris Mellon has done, and even Tom DeLonge, you, George Knapp, you, Jeremy, everything you guys have done on the disclosure front, it has worked. And all the other people behind the scenes in the UAPTF, everyone we don't know the name of, in the government that are looking for transparency, this is working, and we've gotten the media involved. We have everyone involved, and the stigma is dying. So I'm really excited about it. At the same time, I have empathy for people that wanted it all, and they wanted everything. We know there's more information in the special access programs. There's more information in private industry, and we didn't get that. We didn't get case reports. But it's a bright future, and there's a lot going on.
Jeremy, and then you guys as well, this was a matter of trying to manage expectations. We had done a story back in January about, this UAP task force has run into some hiccups. They removed the guy who was in charge of it, a very knowledgeable and experienced guy. Their two staffers were given this assignment, but they were given no budget, and they're given no time really to do it. They had full-time jobs, and they were just told, just get it done in your spare time. And so you really had reasons to manage expectations. We know that there is opposition still in high levels in the military and other agencies, intelligence agencies. So tried to give that information out to the public to not be too disappointed with what's coming. And still, there's no Roswell, there's no Area 51 S4 Lazar, there's no alien abductions, none of the cases from before 2004, and a lot of anger and disappointment from folks. But it really is trying to see the forest for the trees here, don't you think?
Yeah, look, inch by inch, life's a cinch. Yard by yard, life is hard. We have to move inch by inch here. Huge things have happened. We all know the UFO phenomenon is both durational and global. It's been with us forever, since the beginning of recorded human history, and it's all around the world. There are other ways to attack the UFO problem rather than just waiting for daddy to tell us they're real with the government. One of the aspects is opening up the sensor data to the scientific community. That will take our government because they have the best sensor data. I have seen some of it. I know they do. So it's a matter of getting that into the public. There are many paths that we can go by to really open up UFO transparency. And I am going to push. We are going to push. There's more coming out next week. So it really doesn't matter to me the depth or scope with which everything is revealed in a single report. The big takeaway, UFOs are real. They're worthy of scientific study. This is a 180 from the Condon report in the 60s. This is a 180 of policy of government up to now. This is a 180 from where we've ever been. So I'm not going to be discouraged, and not just because I'm an optimist. I truly see progress here on a magnitude that I don't think people yet understand unless they write these kinds of reports.
Danny, you were made a point of engaging with the public tonight leading up to this program. And, I can sympathize with the UFO world people who are distrustful of government. I mean, 74 years of lies and cover-ups and disinformation and misinformation, and now they are expected to trust what the military is saying, to trust that they really are interested in getting into the bottom of this. What have you heard along those lines?
There's people that are upset, and I understand them. They want everything, and I get it. And I want everything too, but we can't just bring everything out to Congress and to the politicians and to the media at the same time right away. They need hard proof, and they need to be, kind of eased in, and that's unfortunate, but it's how it's going. And, the rumor has that there's 70 pages in the classified annex, and the public only got 9. So I don't know if that's true, that there is 70 pages, but it seems like it could be. There's a lot of stuff in there. We know the Tic Tac incident is probably in there, and all these other incidents, and possibly clear videos. And there's a lot of things that the government are probably getting to see that we aren't. So I'm just really excited about what politicians are doing and basically getting to go through now. And they're not going to drop this anymore, and neither is the public, neither is the mass media, and it's just great forward progress.
UFO Joe, you've developed a lot of sources who were insiders, who were way up there, who got to see files and photos and videos and analyze different aspects that the public hasn't get to see. Some of the same stuff that Congress has probably now been allowed to see, those two committees anyway. Talk to me about the public input you've been getting, and talk to me about the insiders and their view of that report and what impact it might have.
You know, the one intel person, I mean, he's not an insider as far as UFO data, but he's been in that world for a long time, so he sees it differently than we do. And some of, to be honest, the other folks that I have who do have connections to the UFO world, they have to be very careful with what they say to me. So as far as the public, I am upset. I mean, I know the history of UFOs, but I'm not one that stays negative for a long time. And just as an example of what stuff I've heard that annoys me, Daniel Sheen, who's Luis Elizondo's attorney for the Inspector General Evaluation, said that Marco Rubio was told by Eric Davis that the ONI and the UAP task force believe these unknowns are off-world vehicles. So I checked out the claim, validated it to my satisfaction. That's what Rubio and the others were told. So my question is, why isn't that in the report? That doesn't give away sources and methods. If that's the truth, tell us that they believe these are off-world vehicles. So is it just too hard for Rubio and Warner? Is it not part of their worldview? I mean, that's lied to by omission. And Bob McGuire, he's an adjunct professor at Virginia Tech, former chief scientist at the Ewing Center. He said the NSC had a meeting presided over by the National Security Advisor and Congress, and they all heard it. Consisted of 70-plus pages, 14 videos. This is the classified briefing, and they got to see the good stuff. He said, I know several people who were in the National Security Council meeting, and the best comment I heard was, quote, what we had was 40 minutes of science fiction movies. We were all gobsmacked. So, we can see some of that stuff. I see no reason why Rubio or Warner can't come out and say, listen, we saw some of these objects, and they're making maneuvers that we don't have. But that's not what they say, George. And I know they're limited to what they can say, but it is frustrating, and I get the anger. I mean, I'm angry too, but this is a major step forward for us. We've been at this for a long time, and I expected what's going on now to happen in 2000, and then 20 years later it happened. So I'm excited, but there's still that part of me that's frustrated, and I get it when people are mad at me for being positive. I got accused of, well, you do this for a living, so you're trying to put a positive front on this. I'm like, number one, I don't make enough money to do this as a living. I would love to, but number two, I would never do that. I was a little worried when I started reading it, but now, 2 days later, it's what it is. It's a first step, and we go from here.
Yeah, I see it as pretty positive. I mean, the fact that Congress, which has seen enough behind closed doors, classified presentations dating back to early 2018, started with just staff members on those two committees, and then it became the members, and then everybody wanted in on it. And then they came out and ordered this report in the first place. Now, we know they got a much larger report. It's more than 70 pages, Danny, is what I was told. And it includes videos and images and things of that sort, specific sensor data, the kind of things that Jeremy has helped release earlier this year. It's impressive enough for them to put their necks on the line and order the report. And soon, I expect them to authorize some sort of a permanent program to investigate this mystery further that has actual resources, money, and the authority to knock down some of the walls preventing us from seeing what's on the other side. So we're talking about Jeremy Corbell, Joe Murgia, and Danny Silva about this UAP Task Force DNI report to Congress and to the public. We're talking about Jeremy Corbell, Joe Murgia, and Danny Silva about this UAP Task Force Office of the DNI report that was released to the public. 9 pages, but a lot of stuff crammed into those 9 pages, and a larger version classified with sensor information, more specifics, maybe video and photos that was provided to Congress. We still don't know exactly what's in it, but we have a pretty good idea based on some of the leaks that have come Jeremy Corbell's way. We're going to get into some of that, what might be in that one, and more on public reaction. Some of the details we haven't touched on that were in this report. Of the 144 cases that were analyzed, 143 remain unexplained. We're going to come right back and have more on Coast to Coast AM. We heard a mention from Jeremy Corbell in the first hour about UFO Jesus. His name is Ryan Robbins. He always has really entertaining and insightful observations about developments in the UFO, UAP subjects. Here's one that he released, a little clip of what he released after this report came out.
Things are looking up if you're a UFO fan. If you're a debunker and skeptic, well, you're probably just going to get more and more puzzled why this is continuing and hasn't fizzled out. There's a lot of assumptions made about this world and how it functions, and those assumptions will die. And with their death will become a new world, a better world, a world of reality. Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. I wouldn't want to do it alone. I got all of you to accompany me. Get ready, people. It's going down, 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 down.
That's UFO Jesus. We'll have Ryan Robbins back on the show pretty soon. You know, we're talking about this UAP task force report, some of the information that they gathered. There are a lot of complaints that it was short on specifics. I saw quite a few specifics. UFO Joe, there were 143 unexplained cases out of 144. 80 of those cases were documented on multiple sensor systems, so they're not mirages or clouds or seagulls. Is that how you saw it?
I did, and you know, one of the more important aspects they talked about was 11 incidents involved in near miss. I mean, that alone, George, is a massive safety issue. You would think if that was the only thing we were dealing with, this would be a priority. And then we had the 80 objects on multiple sensors. And people want to know, you know, like, what else is in the report? What else was there that we didn't see? And one more thing, signature management. So these objects are trying to remain cloaked. They're trying to keep whatever signals they're putting out, they're trying to keep that to a minimum. So it tells me whatever they are, they don't want to be detected. So that may go to a little bit trying to figure out what their intentions are. Maybe not, you know, because then we have 2019 West Coast, and those objects are being blatant. If those are UAP, they're being blatant. So I don't know exactly if either of those are kind of contradictory as far as intentions. But what might be in the classified report, so I was at UFO MegaCon, which I saw you speak a couple of years ago, one of my favorite lectures. So I went down there last month, and we surrounded Danny Sheen after his lecture. It was Alan Steinfeld, Nicole Sackett, and we triple-teamed them, and we said, Danny, tell us what you know about the Inspector General, you know, their evaluation. And one thing he said that Alan was able to get out of him, he said, I saw a picture taken from an F-18 out the cockpit. You can see the cockpit of a Tic Tac 50 feet off the wing. Elizondo has spoken about something similar. I think this is what he's talking about. He said another picture that Sheehan saw was an object that was just in formation flying along with these two F-18s. And I said, did you see this from Lou? He's like, no, I did not get this from Lou. He has his own sources he won't say. So that kind of, if that information is being shown to Sheehan, it's obviously not classified. That's something we can see. I hope that leaks. I want to see that. That's not sources and methods. Maybe their thinking is this is just too blatant. People are going to realize this is not something that we've constructed, so we can't show them. So, you know, hopefully that stuff leaks. I am a fan of leakers as long as it doesn't put our servicemen and servicewomen in harm's way. Leak away, just like what Jeremy's been getting. And Jeremy has been doing amazing stuff. I watch Jeremy on TV to learn how to talk. He is really specific about what he says, and he's really good at it.
Oh, don't tell him that.
For me.
Don't tell him that. It's going to be hard enough to deal with it. I'm coming to Jeremy in a second. Danny, you know, one of the other pieces of data in this report was that there are 18 cases in which these UAP demonstrate really remarkable technological capabilities beyond what we have, beyond what we know that exists in any arsenal in the world. That's a pretty good piece of info, and you have to believe they've got more than just those 18.
That was the really spicy part when they're confirming the advanced technology. And even if, you know, it's chestnut checkers, like I said earlier, and even if we're not talking about aliens, or things that the coast-to-coast audience is aware of, we can bring these things to the national media and the public, the uninterested public, not the coast-to-coast fans, and tell them, hey, this is a security risk. There could be drones. There could be advanced drones from other countries, and that's a great way to get them involved. We don't have to talk about aliens or anything like that. Another thing is this is what the UFO community wanted. We kind of saw the same thing when Lou Elizondo came out. People for decades were asking for some sort of person from the government to come out. And now we know that there's a program going on currently. And now we have a report. People were asking for this report, and now some people aren't happy about it. So I understand that there isn't everything in the report that they wanted, but this is also what we've been asking for, and we need to keep that in mind. Another thing I think we need to be aware of and bring to the public is that there's a current task force going on. There's a current UFO program going on. When there was the reports about the ATIP in 2017, they said it was over. We knew it wasn't over, but they were saying it was over. So I think the public kind of was able to put that in a box. Now we know the name of the UAPTF director. We know there's a task force currently going on. So this should get people involved and kind of make them more aware that the government is taking this very seriously.
Jeremy, we're all wondering what is in the report that went to Congress, the larger report with the classified info, the censor info. You have some insight into that because you've been able to break these videos that we've been talking about, the USS Omaha, that sphere that traveled along with them, the pyramid, the really weird pyramid video that was also released. So you have access to information about other things that are in the larger briefing document that was put together before the UAP task force was officially designated by that name. You're suspecting that we're going to see more of those images one way or another?
Yeah, I know for a fact we're going to be seeing more of those videos and images for sure, starting on Tuesday. So check it out. We know there were about, and I reported on this, there were about 10 videos and 12 photos in the original kind of UAPTF classified briefing. It's interesting to me that there were 14 videos that were part of this congressional effort, because I know for a fact we gave them 4 of them, George. So it's really interesting to me that there are high fidelity imagery and video of UFOs that our government has. I know that for a fact. So the mechanisms for reporting these is broken, and we need to work on that. Well, I should not be part of this equation. You and I should not be part of this equation. They should have had all that information before. But I will tell you right now, not only am I aware, but I possess other photos and videos that will be going public. I am just making sure that nobody's going to be harmed, the reporting process and how we are reporting on it, that it is legitimate, that it is validated. It does no good if I just throw things up on the internet, right? So, look, it is a bright future. You know, people can be upset it's not all coming out right now, all at one time, but if the government's not going to do it, it will come out. And it's not just military, it's civilian as well. You know, first time I'll ever say this, but look, I have received some of the most compelling thermal imagery of UFOs from people, obviously in the military, who have come forward, but also from civilians, from people that work on these, that have position where they can fly jets, as an example, where there are what they call synthetic vision systems. These systems overlay FLIR imagery, so thermal imagery, with optical imagery. I not only have seen, but will be putting out, after the vetting process, as I get through it, these really high fidelity images that are from synthetic vision systems, which again, they overlay all these different types of optic systems. Our military sometimes is slow to adopt this technology because they have to bulletproof test it, all of it. So sometimes the civilian world provides more technologically advanced visuals than our military. So the future is bright, George. I don't know what to say. My beard is very happy.
I would never say that I have seen any of these images, but I'll just say, wow. The Pentagon painted itself into a corner 74 years ago, probably for good reasons. You know, when it started, it was just after World War II. It was the start of the Cold War. It was a tense time for the world, but it's become harder and harder for them to keep this going and still be credible. I think They've caused a lot of damage to their own reputation, to trust in government because of some pretty blatant lies about UFOs. Once FOIA became the law of the land, we got to see glimpses of that, internal memos and reports where they took it seriously, completely contradicting what they had told the public, over the decades. So I think it's going to be tough for whatever study is done in the future, for whatever program might be set up. My hope is that there will be some kind of a permanent program that Congress will provide good funding for. But in the meantime, this incredible directive was dropped right after the UAP task force report comes out, 9-page report from the Undersecretary of Defense. And then it was followed up by the press secretary saying some amazing things, explaining it further. I read that as everybody in the military had better get on board. Danny, did you see it the same way?
Of course, and I just hope that it's shared with the public. But regardless, it's going to be funneled into the UAPTF or whatever kind of program is there. And we've been struggling with the Pentagon spokespeople kind of changing their stories and not being all the way truthful, or at least not being forthcoming. And now we have the name of the UAPTF director. So I'm hoping he comes forward, does press conferences himself. I don't know if that will actually happen. But I think the more the public gets to see a face and a name to this task force and know that there's a current task force, the more that they're going to get involved.
Joe, same thing. When you read that directive, were you stunned?
Yeah, I was totally not expecting that, and I saw that as a great thing. Of course, there are naysayers who said, well, they only told them to report incidents that happened in training areas, so if it happens during something like during some sort of battle or somewhere else, they're not going to report it. I saw that as nitpicking. I mean, technically they're correct, but yeah, that's a really big deal. And then Danny mentioned the spokespersons, and we all know, we're all familiar with Susan Goff, and I just want to point out one thing in the Inspector General report, and I really would love to get your guys' take on this. So when Daniel Sheehan and Lou, they filed a complaint on May 3rd, and then they went to Washington on June 15th, and they met with two assistants from the Inspector General's office, a Defense Department lawyer who wanted to be there. Once Lou brought his lawyer, they wanted to have their lawyer. And then they also brought a colonel from the United States Air Force who was there for the meeting with Elizondo and Sheehan. So when I saw that, I'm like, what is a colonel from the United States Air Force doing in an Inspector General inquiry? So if you guys have any ideas on that, that's something that was not many people have spoken about.
Jeremy, you have any thoughts on that?
No, not at all. I'm just impressed where this is all going.
We had reported, I made a statement in a presentation a couple of years ago. I think maybe, Joe, that's the one you were mentioning, that these pilots off the East Coast, Oceana, the Naval Air Station, were seeing these things every day. And I don't think anybody took me seriously until we saw a statement on a major news program just a month or two ago that, in fact, they were seeing them every day, that they were seeing them all the time. Now, there's no specifics in the UAPTF report, but Jeremy, you and I had released something about these strange objects. They don't look like the Starship Enterprise. They're not shaped like a flying saucer, but there they are, just sitting off of Oceana, off this base, right where these pilots fly every single day, just sitting there, hours and hours and hours, not moving, even though it's high winds. And there is a reference in this task force report to exactly that.
Right. That is incredible, just because it's confirmatory to the public that you're an excellent investigative reporter. I mean, look, it's really nice to be validated. You know, when you go park at a restaurant and they validate you, I feel really good. So it's really nice when things come forward, but we know what we're saying is accurate. But it's really great when it's put forward into pop culture. Again, I really believe, after talking to UFO Jesus, our friend Ryan, that there is going to be a PTSD for those of us that have been really into this for a long time, because, look, this is moving now into a pop culture realm. We are getting what we asked for, which is all the bright minds contemplating, thinking about the UFO problem. It's so interesting. I would like to say that, we need to move the needle forward each day. One of the things that's going to be happening is people are going to be not only hearing, but seeing Commander Chad Underwood for the first time. That's going to happen very soon. I'll tell you that for sure. and he's going to be talking about how he was actively jammed by the Tic Tac UFO. So these objects out there, it's not just that they're hypersonic. It's not just that they have, incredible endurance. It's not just that they have the ability to be transmedia. It's more than that. These vehicles have been with us demonstrating and performing sometimes. Sometimes they're just doing a job, like they were with the Tic Tac UFO. When Commander Fravor engaged the Tic Tac UFO, it was doing a job. It was not my words, docking with something under the water. And he happened upon it. But we also have to realize that happening upon it, look, the SA system, so the system that we use to target these things, somebody told me it's like looking through a straw at a baseball stadium and knowing the seat number and the hat color someone is wearing. These systems target people out to these objects. They then slave over to their own thermal, their own radar. Like, for example, Commander Underwood, he brought back two forms of video. He brought back not only the video that is now famous of the thermal, he brought back video of his radar. That will never see the light of day just because of the security clearances and because of the national security implications. There is high-fidelity data and video and information, and it is being withheld from the American public. It sure as heck should have been shown to the Senate Intelligence Committee. So we have to stay optimistic, but we have to press because of what we know.
Danny, this is the kind of thing that frustrates people when they hear these statements about, and I think Jeremy is 100% on the money on this. I know he is. We've heard similar statements from Lou Elizondo. Oh, boy, there's some really great video and photos and images behind the scenes, and it'd be great to see them. And we haven't seen them. People get ticked off about that.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate. We were hoping more from after 2017, and there's been we got one in 2018, and then there hasn't been any until Jeremy and you, George, have released them this year. So I think the bottom line here is if the government doesn't get them, these armed service individuals are going to get fed up and start leaking them more to journalists, and that's a really important point. Another point is that, Lou Elizondo is saying these things are happening every other week now. So we know about maybe 1% of what's going on with the military. That's a huge time that everything is happening now. So we don't know if the UFO incidents are becoming more and more accurate now, or if it's just the sensors. So I'm not really sure what's going on, and if there is a uptick in the UFO events, what's going on with them?
Feels like a combination of things. Those sensors, the sensors that came in 2019, right at the same time we started having a really big uptick. These dramatic things off the East Coast, the Omaha and the Russell, and 9 warships altogether. Joe, you think it's both, or it's just more that the UFOs have upped their game, or it's more about the sensors?
I've gone back and forth on this. I mean, if UFOs have upped their game and are showing up in larger numbers, then there's obviously, we can speculate that it means they want to be seen and they're trying to force our hand at something. But then again, on the East Coast, if there's signature reduction, they're trying to remain hidden. It's confusing to me because it's contradictory. So, we're trying to figure out intent. Are they here to wake up humanity? Or, as somebody said, are they here to prepare the battlefield? Is something negative going to happen here? And I have no idea.
Hold on a second, Joe. Sorry to interrupt you. We got to go to a break. Joe Murgia, Danny Silva, Jeremy Corbell. We'll take a couple of calls from you, listeners here on the other side. So we're talking about the UAP Task Force report released by the DNI, Director of National Intelligence, on Friday. A lot of reaction from the public, some of it negative, much of it positive. And the negative reaction is a lot about what was left out. That we were hoping to see some mention about nukes, for example. There's a lot of information that's floating around about UAP and their seeming interest in nuclear weapons, nuclear facilities, ICBM bases. Nothing in the public version of that report. Maybe it's in the congressional version. We're going to get back to our panel here, our posse, and ask them some questions, and then open up the phone line, see what's on your mind here on Coast to Coast AM. UFO Joe, I'm sorry to interrupt you there. Did you want to finish that thought, or would you move on, or you have the option?
No, that was fine, George. I just want to say the most exciting thing for me yet today, Eric Weinstein, a mathematician, deep thinker, he apologized to the UFO community. He has 500,000 followers. He's like, listen, I was wrong. You were right. There's more to this. I believe you now when you say there's more data. And I was like, I don't get emotional with this subject, but when I was reading that, I'm like, I had to hold back a little tear. And I know some other people were the same. And then we saw Megyn Kelly, who's a massive name in media. She's asking Lou Elizondo the questions, the proper questions. She's like, what if these are everywhere and we just can't see them because our sensors aren't pointed at them? So I'm really encouraged by that kind of reporting, and we need more of it, So that's something to look forward to, and I never thought I'd see that day where some of the just mainstream people are hammering home the right questions to ask.
Yeah, for Eric to sort of reverse position and admit he was wrong is an amazing thing. Danny, any of your comment on media coverage? I've seen some articles that are pretty inaccurate. They're, the one I mentioned before about it was in Wired where they say, oh, gosh, this is all we get for $22 million. And, of course, there wasn't $22 million in this. Anything else pop out at you?
I haven't been noticing a lot of the crazy wrong coverage. I'm sure it's always out there. I'm just noticing all the coverage in general, and it's great. And a lot of these media guys that weren't paying attention to it 6 months ago, 2 years ago, when we were contacting them, now they're doing it. And now they realize that this is a story that they can't ignore. It's amazing. Not only is it political, but it's mainstream media. And a lot of people say, well, we already know what's going on. Why do we need the government? Why do we need mainstream media? The UFO community knows what's going on, and the coast-to-coast audience knows what's going on. But unfortunately, the mainstream public that doesn't care, our family and friends that laugh at us, they do need the government, and they do need mainstream media, and that's why the sea change is so important.
Jeremy, looking back, this report left open the possibility, a very slim crack of the doorway, that this is foreign technology or secret American technology. It didn't take either of those off the table, even though they said there's no proof of either. And I can see the debunkers jumping on that, or the problems with censors too. They just use those phrases from the report when whatever their next wave of reporting might be. But what's forgotten is that we've been documenting these objects for a long time, we being the U.S. government, our military. 74 years ago, this past week, was the start of the modern UFO era. They were seeing the same kind of craft with the same kind of capabilities back then. I mean, did the Chinese have drones over Roswell or Los Alamos? Did the Russians fly over White Sands back then? I mean, the same kind of craft that are being reported today, some of them pretty exotic, were reported back then, right?
Yeah, look, we have lived in a data-rich environment for a long time. I think we need to embrace the fact that people are jumping in with both feet just in the last year or less. That is so exciting. To comment a couple things on what you guys said, I mean, oddly enough, very funny, like Eric Weinstein ended up calling me the other week, and, that it was so bizarre to me. Here's an individual, a very bright-minded individual. Yes, we have common friends. That's how he got my number. It wasn't because I was doxxed, which I was, but he got my number. And we talked at length, and it was so interesting. He was incensed that the brightest minds that he knows, that they weren't included in the UFO truth. And that's so important. It's so important. So I'm glad that we have people like Eric and other people that are looking at this academically and scientifically. It really gives me hope. It really gives me hope. So, yeah, this phenomenon, it goes way back. Let's talk about something specific. I'm going to drop this next week. I've just been looking it up, making sure I got everything right. But the whole idea of what, Ryan Graves has reported, these cubes within spheres, this is nothing new. I have an article from 1960 from a major publication that talks about, by the way, flashing UFOs that were square objects within spheres. This is from 1960, and not only did a military pilot see it, but also a commercial airline pilot. I will drop that original news article sometime next week. So this is nothing new. We need to be happy we're getting what we want. The world is embracing the UFO mystery. It is time to move forward.
Thinking about this subject, how science has really, I understand how it ended up this way, that they were told, this is a a career killer. There's no grants for this kind of work. It's all nonsense. And I have interviewed all kinds of scientists who are straight arrow folks who will, they have inquisitive minds, but they wouldn't touch this subject with a 10-foot pole because they've been told there's no evidence. It can't be, therefore it isn't, kind of a thing. But I would think that for scientists, as with journalists, this is the biggest ever. There will be Nobel Prizes that will be given out on this eventually, if anybody could nail this down and confirm a non-human intelligence exists out there or here. So I would think any inquisitive scientist would knock down little old ladies to get at this subject matter. The same with journalists who are now finding out, hey, the public is really interested in this subject. The reaction when we write a story about it is over the top. Jeremy, you first, then the other guys too.
Yeah, look, it comes back to exposure. It's like what we're used to. This idea of pushing the boundaries of reality, we take for granted that, like, we will all embrace and accept different ideas. It's hard enough to navigate on social media opposing opinions. I can understand why individuals in prominent positions would completely dismiss the UFO topic because they don't want to be ridiculed. Look, people are human beings. They have feelings. I get it. But when you really focus in on this, it is an absolute failure of our scientific community. It's a failure of just the human approach to new knowledge. People were burned at the stake when we thought that we were, the universe was moving around the earth. Then we understood that we're all moving around the sun. And then we understand the universe is larger than that. It takes time, and I'm okay with that. It just takes time. So I think we're going to see a lot more engagement now with people that have a sort of permission that is being given to them. And I got to say it, by mass media. I mean, look, having people like TMZ, having people like Discovery and Fox, and having these shows that I've been a part of and I'm going to continue to be a part of, I think is really good. I think it brings everything into this place where people have permission to talk, to just ask the questions about what UFOs represent to humanity. I'm so inspired, you guys. I'm really inspired in this moment that we're going to make progress because of the openness of conversation.
Danny, same question. I mean, a lot of scientists out there are now having to reevaluate their lack of interest in the subject, and the same is true for journalists. I mean, all the articles are coming out. A lot of journalists around the world, mainstream people who have covered everything, suddenly have this task ahead to try to digest decades of UFO information and get their head around it.
And that's one of the main things about the report that people are forgetting. Journalists, we've been beating them over the head with facts and government reports now. And now that the report is out, they don't have a choice. They have to cover it. It's no longer their choice to just ignore it, and they have a lot of catching up to do. So now that this report is out, now that there's a task force and hopefully a permanent fixture, they're going to have to report it, and they don't have a choice. And this is a big deal, and the stigma will be gone.
Joe, same thing. Media and science both having to reevaluate their lack of interest in this subject matter for a long time.
And I think they're realizing, as you said, there are Nobel and Pulitzer Prizes awaiting whoever digs into this and gets us some answers. I think that's going to inspire some amazing media coverage. And look at the SETI website tonight, SETI.org. For the first time ever, they're more open about UFOs, So one of the big thorns in our side has been Seth Shostak, the lead astronomer, senior astronomer at SETI, and they're opening their minds. So that's like, if that's not different, because the naysayers are like, this is really nothing different. This has been happening before. No, you're wrong. And SETI is the perfect example. If they can open their minds, anybody can.
Yeah, SETI and UFOs, they're not necessarily, contradictory. I mean, you can have both be true, that they're way out there and they're here too. So if that happens, that would be awesome. We'll take a call or two. First-time caller, Paul in Anchorage. Hi, Paul. You're on with Jeremy, Joe, and Danny.
Hey, George. First of all, I met you a long time ago, and I have a lot of respect for you. I want you to know that. Gentlemen, I don't like to ambush people, but I want to disparage you and chew you out in the most harshest of terms So I'd like to have your permission to do that rather than ambush you, if that's all right with you.
Yes, go for it.
Thank you, because I'm going to be harsh. I'm going to try to stay calm if possible. To hear you gentlemen give a positive spin on this moment is just disgusting in my world. And I want to give you a reason why, and I want to give you a resolution, and I want to make an emphasis on a point here.
Okay, Paul, remember, we're at 11:48 right now, so the program ends at 11:55. So I hope you're not going to do a 12-minute dialogue.
Well, I'm going to give you whatever time you decide I get.
Okay,
that's
all right.
up to you, gentlemen. I trust people. But I'm going to tell you this. I am disgusted. I think you should be ashamed of yourselves, and here's my reasoning for this. I think of all the dead people, and I've been chasing these things for 30 years. I've never seen one, but I've seen books of people who sacrificed their lives, their families, everything, and got disparaged and put in a grave over nothing. I think of those people. I think of a troubled nation in a world so divided now, and this issue is the epitome of everything we seek: energy, knowledge, understanding, a place in the universe. And yet you folks give these people cover for some of the most farcical reports I've seen in my lifetime. And for you should be going after these people in the harshest of terms. These people you should be demanding that every one of our legislatures set aside all their petty differences right now. And I want to see every damn picture in that damn file that goes back to 1960. Now, I understand secret stuff, but the point is that they have no right whatsoever to hold this stuff from us. And for you gentlemen to make out like you're some monolith or some new paradigm in our society, gentlemen, in my world, you're childlike in that attitude. And, George, you know that. I've seen men sacrifice entire lives.
I'm really excited to answer because we have such little time. So is that all right, George? Can I answer,
go for it.
gentlemen?
Yeah, go.
Okay, look, I think that was a very respectful way to go about being angry. And that's cool. I absolutely share your anger. I share your frustration. However, the only way to make progress is to push forward from a place where you're going to have positive results. Do not think for 1 second that it is not infuriating how we are being shown little bits of information when I know firsthand there is more. So I would like to say thank you for being so respectful in the way you wanted to chew us out. But at the same time, please, you must respect. The only way to move forward is to face this head on and to use every means necessary to do so. So I appreciate you. I appreciate your passion. I really, really hope you can target and use that and focus that towards a positive goal as we are doing. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, I would say, Paul, that, I, as somebody who's been chasing this for 32, 33 years, banging my head against the wall, I feel the same way. I still see this as progress. And the UFO public to beat their chests and scream and yell and demand that we want to see everything and we want to see it right now has not worked. It has not worked. I think it's a good idea to keep the pressure on them, but there are secrets that need to be kept. The sensor systems that we have that's detected this information, that's collected this evidence, are sensitive and are classified for a really good reason. As one intelligence official told me one time, who has worked on this for a long time, he said, you can't tell your friends without telling your adversaries. I think there are some legitimate national security reasons for keeping some of that information from getting out. I think they've hidden behind national security for a long time in withholding information and lying to us. But I see real change here. I think things really are changing. But thank you for calling in. Joe and Danny, do you want to also address that call from Paul?
I agree 100% with Paul. You know, I'm pissed off too, but I don't think we're in a big enough group where we can make a difference yet. We are making a difference with media coverage. And also along those lines, why this hasn't come out, Luis Elizondo was asked recently if he believed there was an MJ-12-like group, and that's very controversial. And he said he had seen evidence that group exists, and he had a very close colleague that said to him that there's an element within our government in the black that was interfering with their capabilities at ATIP to collect and analyze data and information, a secret government-type group, and they would intimidate people. He personally hadn't had the experience, but a close colleague of his. So that's Luis Elizondo. So there's more than more below the surface of what we're dealing with. But I agree with Paul 100%. Don't have anything against what he said.
Danny?
The transparency that we're now seeing is what we're fighting for every day. And people like Jeremy and George, who are releasing the photos that were provided to them, is a huge step. Now we have politicians on the same side as the caller asking for this information to be put out to the public. So I think that's huge.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, UFOs are not a voting issue. They don't decide that topic does not decide elections. People vote about the economy. They vote about, they love certain politicians, or they're worried about national security matters other than UFOs. So until it becomes a voting issue, you don't have a whole lot of pressure with which to affect how our lawmakers look at this. But there is progress being made. It's a really exciting time right now. And as I've said before, I never thought I would see this coming. The idea of we'd like everything you've got and we want it now is not a realistic position to have. We don't have enough power to force that, but progress is being made. This is a crack in the dam, and I'm very encouraged by it. Anyone else want to comment? We got about 30 seconds. So.
Yeah, inch by inch, life's a cinch. Yard by yard, life is hard. Let Paul be a warning and a voice of the public. We have a right to know, a need to know, and a responsibility to find out the truth about UFOs. So I thank Paul for calling in, and let's move forward.
All right, Jeremy Corbell, looking forward to some good stuff from you coming this week. And I want to remind you, you're on the Fox special that's airing Tuesday and involved with the Discovery Science Channel project on Wednesday. UFO Joe Murgia, and Danny Silva, Silver Record. We have links to you guys' contacts if people want to check out your stuff. You're both always cranking out great content. Thank you guys for being here. And anything else to say?
No, very excited about what we're gonna see coming up in the near future, and I can't wait to see what Jeremy releases next.
On
Danny?
Tuesday, baby.
All right. Danny, Joe, Jeremy, thanks very much.
If you want to listen to our show ad-free 24/7, access audio archives, live chat with me, and much more, you need to become a Coast Insider now.
So you're telling me your grandmother, who died a few weeks ago, came and visited you last night in your bedroom, and you're not scared?
Are extraterrestrials living among us?
I don't know if it's true or not, folks, but we're going to find out.
If you enjoy stories like these and want to learn more about the mysteries of the universe with me, become a Coast Insider now to access hundreds of our archive shows to listen anytime, anywhere. Sign up now at coasttocoastam.com/Coast Insider. That's coasttocoastam.com/Coast Insider.